Hey everyone, and welcome back to Millennial Mind. I'm so excited to tell you that I've got a new summer series with a very special guest and one that you all loved when she came on my podcast. Every week, I'm trying to make this podcast better for you, and I only ask for one small, tiny little favor from all of you, which is to press the subscribe or follow button wherever you're watching this. I'm so excited to introduce you to this very special series, so let's get into it.
So, here we are again, your favourite duo. Rhona and Shivani, in no particular order, but definitely in that order. Here we are.
Narcissist is here.
Calm down.
I'm happy you did that intro. Rhona did an intro before and she was like, so here we are again.
Listen, I was giving it like seductive, sexy and cool. Like, we don't always have to be happy clappy, right?
Seductive,
that's not the vibe. Like, toxic positivity. Like,
yeah, I know.
That.
Well, today we're actually exploring that topic because we're talking about the inner critic.
Yeah.
And it's something I've wanted to talk about a lot because I feel that not only do I have such a big inner critic, but I think a lot of people do, because a lot of people message me and they say, you know, I'm so critical of myself. I know that I shouldn't be doing this, but when I'm having a bad day, I beat myself up. And when I'm having a bad day, I just think of every horrible thing about myself and I exaggerate it. And I always compare myself and be like, I'm not that nice. I'm not that good. I'm not that creative. I'm not. And I just go into this rabbit hole. And I really want to talk about how we get out of that and also kind of normalize it. Because I think when you go through that, you're almost feeling, oh my God, I'm such a bad person. But everyone does it. What do you do actually?
Oh, all the time. To be honest, I was like literally about to... I get emotional about it, I'm not going to lie. You know, the inner critic is something that I think exists in a lot of us, not all of us. I do think some people hype themselves up, you know, like sometimes,
really?
Sometimes like you really could benefit from a bit of imposter syndrome. You know, there's people that literally think they're amazing and they don't have that like self-reflection. And
I know who you're talking about.
Do you actually? I mean, there's so many people, so I'm not sure. But...
I know who you're talking about, but I don't actually agree with you.
Oh, lol!
I think people do have an inner critic.
Yeah, but I think there's some people that don't actually. Maybe it's cognitive dissonance, right? So cognitive dissonance is when you actually tell yourself a different version. You dissociate almost from the truth, and the story that you tell yourself is to make yourself a better. And I think that's a coping mechanism in a way. So in a way, people would have that, but because they have that cognitive dissonance, they can cope. Yeah, essentially, which I very much don't have. But I think that the inner critic, for me, has started really as young, I think, as sort of like 7, 8, 9 years old. And I think that's when I started recognizing the impact and the influence that my parents and people around me had. And there was this sort of need to impress people and make people feel happy. I don't know, do you feel like it started young for you?
100%. I grew up in an Indian family, but not just like me, my mum, my dad, and my brother. It was me, my mum, my dad's brother, my dad's wife, my grandma, their 2 kids. So there was so many of us in the house, and what that does is actually invite a lot more opinions. Because naturally, when you're growing up, your parents will say, don't do this and don't do that. Well, I had 2 sets of parents and my grandma and my 2 elder cousins telling me not to do that. And I remember growing up feeling very, very, very conscious about my speech, what I used to say and how I used to act in every single way, in so many ways. And look, I love my family. We're all incredibly close. But I think it was very natural in that way for them to all be quite protective, like older siblings and also kind of like second parents to me, because naturally when you do something wrong, you hear your mum or your dad say it. But there was like 9 of us in the house. And so there was more and more people telling you stuff. And so you're more and more conscious. And I think if you talk to a lot of people, they all have that similar experience when they were younger. If they were told off constantly for doing something, when they're older, they're very, very, very critical. And especially in Asian culture and Indian culture, you're always taught to think about what other people think. What will other people think of you? What will other people say?
So it's almost instilled in you.
100%.
Like from a young age that you should be validated, right?
Oh, 100%. You know, that phrase is so well known because people are constantly saying, well, what will that person think of you if you did that? Even the fact that I've just moved out. Someone said to me, what if people think you're living with your boyfriend? And I said, let them think that. I'm not. And I'm okay with you thinking that because that's your opinion and it's not true. So if you're going to think that, then that's on you. I'm not going to not move out before I'm married because you don't think I should be moving out before I'm married and because you think I'm living with my boyfriend secretly. I don't care anymore. And I think I've become a lot more resilient as I've gotten older to really be true to my actions, because if I wasn't true to myself and I didn't do the things that I believed in, I would never be sitting here today. I'd be in my corporate job, literally at the office right now, doing what everyone told me, or I'd probably be a lawyer because that's what my parents wanted me to be.
I think it's such a tough one, right? Because also, like, being from a Middle Eastern background, and particularly my grandma was so religious. You know, she
Really?
was Christian, and she was like, I grew up with like Christian guilt all the time, and having to feel like I had to do anything, or literally I was going to hell, God was going to judge me, and I had this, and in a way, like, it developed this real sense of kind of innate perspective of like what's right or wrong. Like, I innately knew what was right or wrong because I kind of grew with that. And I guess it's because of, you know, because of my grandma being like, this is, you can't lie, you'll get in trouble. You know what I mean? You can't cheat because you'll get in trouble. So I think I grew up with those like really strong values instilled in me. But there was very much like, people are very aware of you, what you do, what you look like, etc. And it's so funny because in therapy, I'd spoken to my therapist about it, and she was like, what were you like when you were a little girl? And I was like, I remember I used to love the camera when I was a little girl.
Really?
And I didn't care and I was like, I didn't care what anyone thought. And I remember like pushing away, like my sister was really shy, or like my cousin, and I was like, no, 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 no.
I was really shy.
Oh,
Can you believe that?
really? Oh,
so there's this video
times
of
have
me.
changed.
Times have changed. But I'm still shy with certain things. Like, I'm shy when I'm singing. Like, really shy. And when I was younger, I used to always be forced to sing because I was actually quite a naturally good singer. And there's a video of me when I'm like 3. I'm literally 3 years old. And I'm like singing with this mic. My mum's trying to video me. And I'm like, I'm shy. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I think I was always very conscious because, especially with singing, I had this reflection recently. I would think I would want it to be like a professional singer. And I would think people would compare me to a professional singer. And if I wasn't the professional singer, which I wasn't, I would think I was crap. And therefore I wouldn't sing. I wouldn't even sing in front of my parents. I would feel shy in front of my own mum and dad. And they to this day will still say I'm Celine Dion. You know, they will literally think I'm the best singer in the whole world. But even in front of them, I'm so conscious.
Do you know what's so funny though? You know what's crossed my mind as you say that is that often many of us don't do anything because we're so scared that in the pursuit of something that we won't achieve perfection.
100%.
So we don't even start it, right? So for example, like you said, you didn't sing because you were so afraid that you weren't at the standard that you thought you should be.
Exactly.
And people sometimes ask me like, Rhona, how do you do X, Y, and Z in your career? Or how do you do this? And I was like, because I actually don't care about being perfect. I don't care. For me, it's just about starting. Right?
So
and
true.
that's why I said, because when I do something with so much love and passion and imperfection, there comes authenticity. And I think authenticity
100%.
is what matters, because even when I was like, I put you, I'm going to be completely honest now, on like a pedestal. I was like, Shivani is the actual bee's knees. And I talked about you so much. And that's why, you know, when we first made contact, like, I was like, your podcast is so big and so impressive and so great that actually I don't deserve to be on your podcast yet. And I think we've spoken about this because, you know, I introduced you to a few guests, etc. And I'd never asked you, because I have this motto of like, you don't ask, you don't get. But I thought, you know, this is something that if she wants me to be on it, she's going to ask me. And that means that I've reached a level that should be on her platform. Then naturally, obviously, we got on really well. We recognised that we had a lot to offer, the value that we could give to people. And I think that's where that relationship flourished. But instead of over planning, as you can see, I'm like, I believe in the process. I just start. So I'm like, just do it. Just start. Like, obviously having a plan in place is super important, and taking those little steps, but just starting is a step in itself.
And look at you now, you're a resident guest.
With my legs crossed. Yeah.
But, you know, first of all, by the way, you've put me too much on a pedestal because it's really not that big.
She's actually not that great in real life. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
So savage. But, you know, I've talked about this so many times, and I just recently did a video on how I grew my podcast. And, you know, I wish someone told me 5 years ago, just believe in yourself and do it. That's my biggest piece of advice to anyone in life, is believe in yourself and do it. Because so many people told me you're never going to make money from it, you should never do it. And then there was loads of people that told me quit your job and do it. And just, you know, it was such a conflict of opinion. I never know who to believe. And it was only when I actually sat down and I do these things that I love them so much. You know, I haven't recorded now for 2 months, and I feel so happy and excited today, even though we're on like our 4th video. I feel like I'm on my 4th video. I feel really excited because this is what I love. This is what I'm so passionate about.
You don't feel like it's work?
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. I also do not agree with this phase of, if you find something you love, you will never work in a day in your life. I think that is complete and utter bullshit, because with this podcast, it's not just this conversation. It's the editing, it's the thumbnails, it's the coordination, it's the constant reviewing, it's the 15,000 edits on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. It's not just this podcast. There's loads more that goes in underneath it, and I don't really love the underneath work. But this conversation is what I love. And so I think that phrase is like a little bit outdated. But anyway, going back to kind of the inner critic and this fear of starting.
It's parents. I'm going to just say it before you say it.
What?
Yeah, I'm going to say that I think the inner critic is born out of the conditioning that we have from our parents. And I'm not blaming them, because I think most parents have done the best that they know and they could. And particularly the generation of our parents, they didn't have access to things like mental health, self-work, particularly in my parents, you know, they're immigrants for the Middle East. And it was like, okay, we need to survive the war. My mum was like, I need to survive the Civil War.
My mum got kicked out of Uganda.
Yeah, so literally, it's like survival had a completely different meaning. So they're not sitting there worrying about like anxiety because, you know, of the things that we worry
They
about.
just cope. I think that, you know, when I speak to my mum and I tell her about all these things, she's so happy I'm doing that work. And this is one of the reasons why I love my mum so much. And I think this is what we need to encourage from women. If you have been through something and you wish it was different, put that upon your child. Put that upon your friends.
Yeah.
Right? Do not incur the same trauma onto your friend or your child because it's like, well, I had to go through that.
But I think it's such a subconscious thing, though, Shivani, if I'm honest.
No, be conscious of it.
Totally, but they don't understand that being conscious is also part of doing the work, because even when I see sort of like patterns repeat itself, because so for example, right, you're going to learn this about me. Here we go. I have a very strong inner critic, and anytime anybody is upset, I blame myself, okay? And when I blame myself, I become quite defensive as well, and I feel that I'm being told off. And I think if I think about it now, it's because when I was a child, again, my parents did the best work that they could. I always felt I was being told off because things were my fault. So if I was being a child that was like a bit hyper and I would drop the Coke that was on the like table, for example, my dad would tell me off and I get a little smack on my hand or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that constant like you've done something wrong, and especially by teachers, has made me feel that it's always my fault. And so really interestingly, I just got back from South Africa. I think, you know, I've been on this trip, and there was somebody there that didn't know me that well, and she had expressed that she was annoyed because I didn't come back to the campsite. I didn't come back, from the campsite to the stage because it was a festival. When I said I would, but then I got lost and it got cold, and the person that was going to take me back, it all fell through. And I felt like she was telling me off, and I immediately became really defensive. And she was like, I'm not angry with you. I stipulated that I'm not angry with you. Why are you getting defensive? And I had to later on explain to her, because I'm working through that defense is my familiarity. So when you become defensive, as I do, it's my familiar state to protect myself. It's my survival mechanism. So I actually don't know any different, because it's me as a child becoming like, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I can't get rid of that. And that's the inner critic, that blame, but also that defense that I need to survive somebody's like kind of telling me off.
How interesting. So as you were speaking, I think I have a really similar experience to you, but I'm not defensive. I actually just lash out. And I lash out at myself. I'm very reactive. Yeah,
it's the other person.
Well, I think when someone tells me off, I am reactive, and then for about a day I'll think about the example and I have conversations with them in my head, and it's awful.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like, I think you're so right, because when I got told off when I was younger, it was always like, oh, you spilt this, or you did this wrong, or, you know,
didn't work hard enough, didn't revise enough, you didn't pass the
literally.
Maths, you know,
yeah, you're so right. I think that's why I actually get so much anxiety when someone's like, I need to tell you something. I'm always like,
yeah, me too.
What have I done?
But you know what? That is my instant reaction.
Yeah,
Sometimes
always.
when people go, hey, I need to speak to you about something, I go, is everything
what have I
okay?
done? And actually, this is really interesting, because I spoke to my friend Vicky about this, and I said to her, I always say, I'm the problem. That is always my default. I am the problem. And we actually spoke for an hour about this over dinner, because I said to her, like, I always feel like I'm the problem with any situation. I will look at it as if like, I'm the problem. I've done this wrong. It's my mindset. It's my viewpoint. It's my insecurity. And she was like, you know what? Sometimes, Shivani, you're not the problem, because what's happening with this particular situation is you've changed your mindset. You've changed the way you've approached it. And guess what? It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
So you're not the problem. And she was like, what happens is that because you always think you're the problem, you're responsible.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why you're so critical, because you feel you need to fix it and you feel like you need to overcome it.
Do you not feel like also you get into this like mode where you actually try to fix the problem?
Oh,
like
yeah,
you
all
do
the time.
everything you can
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try and make that person feel better, or like come up with solutions for them.
Exactly.
Or do everything. I go into this massive overcompensation mode, and it's
100%.
so exhausting. But I think that is the inner critic. And one of my favourite accounts to follow is the holistic psychologist. I think I told you about her, Nicole Pereira.
Yeah.
And she is amazing because she talks about so much conditioning, and I think it also describes things like attachment style. So yeah, there's a great book called Attached. I don't know if you know it, but it talks about our attachment styles in relationships. So for example, we can have an avoidant attachment, which means that in relationships, even if we like being in relationships, we tend to have avoidant tendencies. So we might go for long-term relationships. We value alone time. When it comes to real commitment, we make excuses like, oh, they're just not the one, I just don't feel it, etc. They have like these avoidant patterns. Then you have somebody that has an anxious attachment style. So they're the ones that need the constant reassurance, the text messaging. Someone doesn't say where they're going or where they are. They're like, oh my God, anxiety. People with secure attachment, which don't have any of these issues, and then I'm in the niche of like anxious for avoidant. Do you know what I mean? And basically, again, that's all about your childhood, and I think that's where like the childhood has an impact on that inner voice that carries you throughout life. And having that awareness is a huge step. Like I said, like I have that awareness, but changing the dialogue and narrative is really difficult because although, for example, in Africa Burn, I was like really defensive. I knew I was being defensive. She called me out on being defensive, and I had to explain to her, I have issues that I have not worked through, so I tend to become defensive because I feel like I'm protecting my inner child. I actually said that to her, and it sounds really weird, but being vocal about it almost made her understand the way I react, and it made her more conscientious of the way that I am and a little bit more sensitive.
I think we all have our own baggage, unfortunately. I know no one wants to kind of admit that, but we all go through different childhoods, we all go through different patterns in life, we all go through different parents and different friendships that have a real big impact on us. I spoke to this neuroscientist who said that from 3 months, when you're in the womb...
Gabble says the same.
Right? Everything that's going on has an impact on you.
It's mental, isn't it?
0 to 7 years old.
Okay, so
it's the most important time.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a spanner into the works, right? Because I think, again, there's a real danger of what is going on, particularly in social media, where people are very aware of the inner critic and the inner child as well, which are two different things. But...
well, what's the difference?
So you've got your inner child as well, which is the young inner child. And the inner child is somebody that needs to be loved, nourished and cared for. So when it feels neglected, it reacts in a certain way. The critic is the voice, that internal voice in your mind that gives you that criticism. Shivani, you're shit. Shivani, you're not doing enough. Shivani, you need to do more. Shivani, you're lazy. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So they're two different things, right? And I think in a way, when you nourish the inner child, then the inner critic can be tamed as well. So I think, they work hand in hand. That's just my own perspective. That's not something that's scientifically been said or proven.
Right.
However, I think that there is a danger of people saying that the problems that we have within ourselves are mainly related to childhood. As you said, it could be as early as being 3 months in the womb. And there's been a lot of talk and encouragement about literally cutting out parents, or what they call, I think, like dissociation or something like that. There's a term for it. And I think that's extremely dangerous because I think really... your parents did the best they could, most parents. I don't know everyone's parents as well. And I think there's a real danger in that as well. And we should actually give them grace a little bit because they just had different sort of worries and anxieties, and we should be thinking about nourishing ourselves, but having a way to be like, okay, they've said this, but I'm okay.
Look, I understand that point and I completely agree. Where I kind of have a different opinion on it is that in life, if you don't know how you've impacted somebody, you should be willing to listen.
100%.
So if you go to your parent and you say, this really impacted me, I would like this to change going forward, and they say, I'm not interested, at that point, what do you do? Do you see?
I hear you.
It's very difficult because if you're saying that, if I come to you and I say, Rhona, it's really impacted me the way you said something to me today, and I really care about our relationship, and I have a 5-step confrontation framework. But, when you start with care and you say it in that way, if I come to you and said, Rhona, look, obviously you'd feel anxious because you're like me, you'd be like, shit, what have I done wrong? But if I come to you and I just say, like, look, I really didn't like the way, we spoke about this today, and so, going forward, because you're like one of my really good friends, I want to make sure that we preserve our relationship, and so if you didn't speak to me in that way, that would really be really helpful. I'm sure you'd be like, find it hard to hear at first, but you'd be like, all right, I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%, but I think...
I think you have to be open.
100%. I think open conversations are absolutely key, but I think at the same time, when I'm thinking about sort of the older generation, of course, if you're lucky enough to have parents that have done the work and really understand, then you're lucky enough.
It's true.
But sometimes you're not, and sometimes your parents just don't get it, and if they've grown up with completely different anxieties and stresses and cultures and not been given the tools, you can't expect them to just suddenly be like, okay, let's sit here and have a debrief and, like, work through this all. But again, it's about how you manage what they're saying. It's about almost you being like,
So
okay,
true.
they've said this, but also you being able to nourish your inner critic and inner child. And there's loads of little different things that you can do. So for example, one exercise that I found really helpful, sometimes I look at photos of myself. I was so sweet. Like I was the cutest like ever. And what I find is they say, imagine saying things to that child in that photo that you say to yourself, and look at your face. Like, you know what I mean? You get so sad.
I was not that sweet. I had like a moustache and I had glasses and like sideburns down to my jaw.
I obviously had like J-Lo hair and was like absolutely working life. But go on.
My glasses were like so small as well. Like they're actually kind of cool now. Ray-Ban have
eyes
released them.
lasered?
Yeah, I have laser eye surgery. Best thing in the whole world, by the way.
Yeah.
Talk about it another time.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I look at that picture, if I was mean about that, I would feel so bad. Like, why are you being mean to this girl?
Imagine with your little glasses. Like, you just never do it. I know, like, you'd never do it.
Never. And I think my mum and dad felt really sorry for me as well, because I remember one time, I remember this so distinctly in year 7, going to PE, and I had really hairy legs, like really hairy legs. Also had laser now, which is also the best thing ever. But really, really hairy legs. And I remember so distinctly walking into Sainsbury's with my mum and begging her to buy me a razor, like begging her and be like,
How old were you?
Please. I was 11. I was like really young. I was like, I'm born in July, so I was very young. And I said, please, Mum, it's so embarrassing. All of the girls don't have it. And she was really sweet and she got me Nair. Do you remember the laser hair removal?
Yeah.
But it wasn't shaving. It was just like,
I
it was
like,
stupid.
yeah.
It was like, even it stunk. And you had to like rip the cream off.
remember.
Anyway, I remember she did that for me. But I also remember being like 8 or 9, because this is when I lived in the house with all my cousins.
Hold on, but let's just go back to the Nair thing. So then how did you feel like going in? Did kids comment?
I don't remember anybody commenting, but I just remember being in Sainsbury's and asking and begging my mum.
But did you remember having any kind of like kids sort of bullying you or anything about it?
No, I think I was just very, very, very conscious. I don't ever remember anyone bullying me.
Okay, but a question for you, like, where do you think that conscious feeling came from, and do you think it's right as a parent? Because
to do that?
Because
yeah, I do.
We're conforming as well to
No,
beauty
because
standards.
look, at the end of the day, I don't remember being bullied, but I probably was, and I went to quite like a mixed school, and there was also like loads of people from different cultures there. It was a multicultural school, but anyway, I just remember begging my mum, and I know that I begged my mum for a reason. It's the same as when I was like 8 years old and I went into my dad's bathroom, actually my uncle's bathroom, and I used his shaver to shave the middle of my eyebrows. And my mum was like, you didn't do it properly.
Can we just talk about my eyebrows for 1 second, right? So I had a bit of a monobrow. I had really thick brows and it was the 90s, right? So it was like all that kind of era. And I actually got bullied for my eyebrows. People made fun of them at school. I got bullied and I took a flipping razor and gave myself tadpoles. Do you remember the whole tadpole look?
Yeah, that's what I had. That's what I had.
Yeah. And do you know what's so lols about fashion is that now everyone wants my eyebrows because they're
thick
just
eyebrows.
so thick and like bushy and
I
whatever.
know.
And now I get a million DMs being like, where'd you get your eyebrows done? What? Your eyebrows are a whole mood and a vibe. And I'm like, they are a mood. They are a mood. And you know what? Just because fashion said they weren't a mood, they turned into like little tadpoles from being slugs, and they're better being slugs. So like, I think it's just like, it's really sad though, because as children, but then I have like a trauma about my eyebrows as well. Like, it's like, I love them now because I learned to love them. But because
they're on trend.
But because I was bullied about it, I still think like, it's still like very much like on my, the first thing I look at are people's faces, eyebrows. Isn't that weird?
Lol,
And
I
teeth,
never do my
obviously.
eyebrows.
And like teeth. Yeah, but I like them like a little bit untamed. I forgive you. But I think, it's so funny because we develop it. And again, like, this is the thing with like body image, right? Like, the critic thing is that I was really scrutinized for my body growing up. And that was by my family and also by people at university. And I was asked, it was like pretty horrendous. Like, I haven't really opened up much publicly about it because it was sort of like a dark time. But as a kid, I loved my body. Like, I loved myself. Isn't that like, I had such freedom and I loved it. And it wasn't until people started telling me when I was young that I was overweight, again, like in the 90s. And it was like kind of like big bum, like Kim K, J-Lo and all that stuff. So I was like, okay. And then I went to university and, oh my gosh, Shivani, you could have told me a necklace was the wrong way around. Anyway.
I didn't actually notice, sorry.
And I went to university and I was asked to model all the time. So I used to get stopped for modelling all the time. I used to go to castings. I was in the university fashion shows, blah, blah, blah. And the girls at uni were all white, skinny, boarding school girls, and they were very much averse to like eating disorders and so forth. And I'd never really been exposed to that in my London multicultural school. And when I lived with them and they were coming to castings with me and all the shows, they would make comments on, you know, my body and how I needed to lose weight and, you know, the size of my legs and my bum. And I didn't have that typical kind of like Kate Moss body. And it was the first time in my life that I really like got into sort of like a restrictive eating pattern. And I was like, okay, I need to lose weight. And I lost a lot of weight, and people then said, you look too skinny. Do you know what I mean? It's like I couldn't like satisfy anyone. And I felt so disgruntled. And I think that will never, ever leave me. And then obviously like I got over it. You know, it took a lot of time. I went into the real world. I worked. I put on 10 kilos. It was really difficult. I think, you know, once you've kind of been like the smallest version of yourself, it's really difficult. And I think what was really hard is that inner critic stays with me day in, day out. And no matter what I do, there is part of me that still looks in the mirror and criticizes my body parts. And I hear those voices. And I don't really know how to get rid of it. Like there's awareness around it, but there's a very much like lack of acceptance.
That is so interesting that you never experienced any body issues. I hated my body growing up.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Hated every part of it. No, but when I was younger, hated it. I've always had, as you can see, really, really long legs. Like our legs are literally the same size.
I'm 5'9.5".
I'm 5'5", and she said I was short. By the way, so rude. 5'5" is a perfect height, actually.
Okay, cool.
No, actually, I don't think it is. I would like to be 5'7". But anyway, my legs are really, really long, and my torso is really short, and I put weight straight onto my stomach.
Okay.
And so growing up, I was always so jealous of everyone who had a flat stomach.
Yeah.
So jealous.
I kind of had like the opposite problem.
And it was only till last year where I was so incredibly stressed out in my life, where I lost like 8 kgs just from stress, that actually I had a really lovely stomach, and I really enjoyed my abs. And it was last year when I looked really ill at one point, and I remember being like, I don't look well, like this is not right.
But you see how dangerous that is though.
Yeah.
Okay?
But then today, remember I said to you when I wearing a tight top, like, oh, does my stomach look fat?
But you know,
it's so bad because now consciously I'm like, but I used to look like that. But I'm not really conscious. I think I'm not really so conscious, because at the end of the day, I'm also like, I'm so healthy. My body last year was so unhealthy.
But this is what I'm about to say, because do you remember Ariana Grande? She came out recently and she said that everybody was celebrating the smallest version of herself recently.
That's what people were saying to me.
And
half the people were saying I'm ill, and half the people were like, your abs look great. You look great. I was like, I look disgusting.
But she said, what you don't know is that I am the unhealthiest I have ever been, because I'm stressed. I've got depression. I'm not sleeping, or I'm oversleeping. And like, she came out and really publicly said that, like, don't talk about people's bodies. Don't make comments, because you don't know what's going on behind that. And when I was at the most tiny version of myself, I was on the borderline of being anorexic. Do you see what I mean? You know, and people were telling me I looked so much better. And for what? Do you know what I mean? Like, for what? It's just, and it's hard, because I think the inner critic like develops, and I think that self-love is key. And I'm really, really glad that although I am of the millennial generation, that we are having more conversations about body image and body acceptance, and that we are challenging big brands, including fashion brands, and being like, no, not everyone is a size 0 who is 6 foot. It's just not going to happen. And there are many, many women that are beautiful in all shapes or sizes. And I think that's an exciting thing to be part of.
I agree. I think the inner critic definitely develops from people making constant comments. And I think I had such a range of comments. Last year, people were like, you look amazing, you look great. And I thought I looked really unwell and ill. And it was because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating as much. I was so stressed last year. I was really, really actually very internally unwell. And then the other people were saying, oh, you're anorexic. You're obsessed with dieting. What's wrong with you?
Really? Yeah.
And it was such a conflict of people. But actually I was really strong in that, because I knew that I was really unwell. And I knew that I was kind of in this cycle where I had to work really, 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 really hard, and I wasn't going to the gym. But it was temporary, and I kind of got through it, and I kind of put that in my mind. And now I feel really healthy, and I think I look much better. But I think people's constant comments about you will only affect you if you're not secure in yourself about something. So we need to work on not allowing our inner critic to take over. So one of the things that I really do is my affirmations. As you know, I'm so like into my crystals. I'm like obsessed with them.
Oh my God, can I have that water bottle, by the way?
I'll get you one. You can't have it. It's mine.
Why?
Because it's mine. I'm drunk from it.
I just feel like the purple and green is such a vibe today, but fine. I'll wait.
Yeah, I'll get you one of some soul space.
The crystals are whole vibes.
I thought you could say they're horrible.
I mean, they're a whole vibe. I love them.
So nice.
They're beautiful.
But I wear all my crystals as well. And I know people will think it's like blah, 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 boo, boo. I don't care. I do my affirmations every single day without fail. And, you know, people can affirm different things. This is weird. You know, I started affirming for a new flat, and I kept saying, I'm so happy to be living in my dream area I'm not going to say where I live. And it came true.
Okay,
I'm not joking.
totally. But you know what? I'm going to show you the next time you come over my journal from 2017, where I was working in a horrendous, no, actually 2015? Was it 2015? Anyways, I was in the worst situation. I was in a job that was really insecure, wasn't enjoying working on the NHS because of burnout and stress. I was trying to make Chelsea work because I just started working there and I had no list. And basically I wrote down like 10 things that I wanted. And one of them was like living in Notting Hill, earning X amount, creating a clinic like this. And then I found the diary last year and everything on that bloody list came true.
Madness.
And I was like, that's just so crazy. But obviously, like, I worked so hard on that. Now, having said that, I do think that the inner critic isn't such a bad thing. And you should actually learn to become best friends with the inner critic.
Exactly. Your shadow.
Your shadow, exactly. The thing is with the inner critic is that if you learn to become best friends with the inner critic, you can almost allow the inner critic to guide you. Because if you think about it, the things that we said, that voice telling you that you're not good enough has actually propelled you to go even further because you push yourself further. Now, I'm not saying that it's conducive all the time, but it's about when knowing to say, like, listen, pal, be quiet, or knowing, you know what? Let's do this. Let's just prove that wrong, you know?
You can rewire your thoughts with the affirmations.
Yeah.
You need to be aware of your inner critic to tackle it with those affirmations.
Yeah.
So whenever something happens and I'm critical about myself, like for example, when I drink, the next day I wake up, I have about 3 billion thoughts going through my head, and I'm so self-critical of the evening. By the way, I will think about every single thing I
What
said.
is about alcohol that does that? Because obviously, you know, I don't drink.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't do that, but I don't know.
But why does it make you feel that way?
I don't know. I think I never felt that way when I was younger. I think it just makes you feel, I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's a depressant, right? So.
Yeah, probably that's why. But I don't drink heavily. I can have 3 drinks and I'll be drunk. And the next day I'll still have those doubts in my mind about what did I say? What did I do? Was I too loud? Was I too this? Was I too that? And I think that by openly having these conversations with people, and I've realised sometimes it's just accepting it. Like one of my friends said once, yeah, you were too loud. But I love that about you. You are loud.
Exactly.
You are loud, Shivani.
And
I was like, oh my God, you just said I'm a loud person. She was like, but you are loud. And I was like, oh my God, I want to die inside that you've just said that to me. God. But she was like, but we love that about you.
Exactly.
That makes you who you are. And so, first of all, understanding my shadow, my inner critic is like, I'm too loud. Yes, I am loud. Once I accept that I'm loud,
you're cool.
I know that, okay, I am. So people expect that of me. I don't need to overthink everything 100 times. And I've spoken about the spotlight effect so many times. You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you think there's a spotlight on you because you think everyone is
But
staring
no one
at your
cares.
problem. Everyone's got their
No
own bloody
problem.
spotlight on them.
Yeah, but also the other thing is, like on that note as well, it's so funny because when I was in South Africa, my best friend said to me that there was a guy there and apparently he was like, I love Rhona. Like, she's so great. He's like, she's so extra. And then she goes, the thing is, like, you're so extra. And we love you. I was like, what do you mean I'm extra? Me
It's
extra?
the worst thing when someone says that.
And they were like, but that's why we love you. They were like, you're like the sober version of Ab Fab. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Who's Ab Fab?
babe, you're so young. Like, literally, Joanna Lumley.
You're so old.
Oh my God, I can't even deal.
Who is Joanna Lumley?
She's the one that's like blonde and she talks like this and she's really posh. Okay, just like Google it later. But anyways, the point is they're extra. They're extra with the like big coats and like, do you know what I mean?
You are actually.
I'm Ab Fab. So
this is in Friends where Phoebe's like, but you're...
again, she's obsessed.
We haven't mentioned it on this podcast. But in Friends when she's like, you're flaky. No, what is it? You're scrappy. Do you watch Friends?
Babe, I watched like 100 years ago, pal. It's not a thing anymore.
Let's just keep a moment of silence for your rudeness. But anyway, there's an episode in there where Phoebe's calling Monica something and she's saying like you're scrappy or you're something. And she's like, anyway, they have this whole debate where they're like, how can you call me that? I can't believe you said that. And then she's like, okay, yeah, I am. And she accepts it. Anyway, our whole point here.
Acceptance.
Yeah. Really, really important. And then the next point I really want to talk about, boundaries.
So boundaries for me is something that I found incredibly difficult, especially being a health professional on social media. And I'll tell you why that is because as a healthcare professional, it is within you to constantly worry and care about your clientele and your patients, right? So I'm sure you know, because you've interviewed a few dentists and doctors, we take those problems with us home. We take them home. And because I'm so accessible on social media, patients message me all the time. And then if they see me online and think I don't respond, it's really difficult. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So for me, it's been a really, really difficult boundary. I haven't actually been able to put it into effect. However, when it comes to boundaries regarding people, I feel there are certain things that I do which allow me to honour my mental health and honour myself. So for example, I had recently been diagnosed with a thyroid problem. And I know that naturally I become very exhausted. And I used to allow people to keep me out really late for late nights, etc. And I would be deemed to be boring if I went home early, particularly because people blame it on my sobriety because I've never drank, etc. And I was always the last person in the room. But now I literally say to my best friend when she's at my house, I'm like, it's 10 o'clock, can you get out, please? Like, that's my boundary. I'm like, love you, but bedtime.
This
like,
is mine at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, but I'm like, no, but I'm like, honour me. Like, I want to be honoured because that's my boundary and I know what makes me feel like crap. And my boyfriend knows the same as well. I'm like, I need silence like at 10:30 because it takes me like half an hour to fall asleep. I need to be warm, like that's my thing. I need to be fed well, and I need to go to the gym. Like if I don't get those basic things, and even I will be a princess about it, for example, on holiday. Like when my boyfriend and I are away, I'm like, I'm not that high maintenance. I know I look it, but I'm actually not. But if I have those basic boundaries ignored, which are important to me, I'm actually not respecting myself, and I get angry because I'm trying to please other people. And so my boundary is, if you don't respect my boundaries, goodbye.
I've learned to compartmentalize like that a little bit as well. So I think in terms of boundaries and inner critic, I think I've just learned to just shut the door and leave.
How do you do that? Tell me, because I can't.
Honestly, I think I've realised with social media, and I think I've learned this through social media, because you're on so many different platforms, there's always someone that's going to critique you. And I've just realised that, why am I going to let you ruin my day? I'm never going to get that hour back. I'm never going to get that day back. And don't get me wrong, there are days where I let it affect me. But most of the time, I'm just like, why do I care? I don't care. I literally don't care about your opinion. If you came to me and told me something, I would value your opinion. But if a random person, 123 user 456 Robin Hood, is speaking about me on the internet, then I don't need to care about it. And it's helped me compartmentalize my life, because I've now been able to be like, you're upset, you're annoyed about something, you're critiquing me for something, I don't care. So why am I going to beat myself up for you?
I think for me, it's always been a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that because I've not had the self-belief and the self-love that I'm good enough, that if a random person says I'm not good enough, I'm like, see, I'm not good enough, that person says so.
But Rhona, that changes over time. And I think the problem is with that is I have got my external validation from other people. So you're so right. For so long, I always thought I wasn't clever, I wasn't good at anything, I wasn't ever going to achieve anything. It's with time I've had so much positive affirmations from other people, and they're from people that I find credible, they're from people who I value, that now I've started to believe that about myself, which isn't probably the right answer, but it's the truth.
I guess so. And I guess I've been lucky to have some of that validation, but it's almost like it doesn't exist because it's still instilled. And that's why, as well, it's such a complex subject. But the first step is having that awareness. Are you somebody that continuously speaks to yourself in a negative way? Exactly. Practice those exercises. Talk to that inner child. Would you talk to them in the same way? Put that photograph near you in sight so you remind yourself of that. Understand as well that if baby history repeating itself, are you responding in this way because of your childhood, because of the way that you were spoken to, available, unavailable parents, being told off, being told you weren't good enough, neglectful parents. There's so many different things. And then you work through that and you recognize that it's your response to things that are important, and that your trauma doesn't have to shape who you are now. You
just have to focus on what you can control. And I say that all the time. You want to influence so many different things, and you can. You can influence your parents, you can influence your friends, you can influence people on social media. But what can you control? Your mind.
Exactly.
And you.
Exactly.
And so that's what you have to focus on. And that's what I really try and focus on now, because there's this amazing equation by Guru Gopal Das, and he's a monk. And he says, do you have a problem? Yes. Can you do something about it? Yes. Do it.
Yeah.
Do you have a problem? Yes. Can you do something about it? No. There's nothing you can do.
Exactly. And that's why they say as well, for the Baz Luhrmann quote, I have to send it to you. I keep telling you about this song. But he says, don't worry, but know that, he goes, don't worry, but if you worry, know that worrying is as affected as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubble gum.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
And he says the biggest worries in your life probably won't even cross your worry mind. So the things that you don't even worry about, the things that are actually going to happen, you know?
Exactly.
So I think that that's a really effective thing to remember. Also, one thing that really does help is journaling, because for me, it's not necessarily journaling in the moment. It's actually looking back on the journal.
Correct.
And your journal has been absolutely amazing, because when I got it a few months ago, when I came onto your podcast, I found that it was extremely easy to write down thoughts in a compartmentalized way. Exactly. And also it was very clear. So unlike other journals, it wasn't so broad, and when you have this sort of small manageable areas to write into, it's actually easier. And the beauty about journaling for me is, as I said, not so much writing in the moment, but looking back.
Exactly.
That's what I wrote then, and look at where I am now.
And that's why I put that question in, what are you proud of today? Because when you're writing something you're proud of every single day, and then you go back, you actually look back and say, I am really proud of myself of that. I am really great in that way. And I'm not going to beat myself up for something. And just to close on this, we all make mistakes in life and none of us are perfect. And if you make a mistake, forgive yourself. You're human. You don't need to beat yourself up for days. Just accept it and learn to be better. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all trying to grow. We're all trying to be better. We're all trying to do the best that we can for ourselves. Yeah. And the worst thing you can do is beat yourself up and not get back up.
Exactly. So I'm so grateful to you as well, because I feel like we really understand each other on that. And also surround yourself by compassionate people.
And nice people. So when you're feeling shit about yourself, remember what your friend said about you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're great.
I am great. I'm extra.
I was hoping you were going to say, you're great, but your response was, I'm great, I'm extra. This is the self-confidence we all need.
There we go. Self-affirmation and self-love.